Hello and welcome back to Tasha Can Make That. I want to chat with you today about a topic and a sewing supply that plays an important part in my sewing process. Let's talk about why I like to trace sewing patterns. There are a lot of good reasons to trace off your sewing patterns, both vintage and modern. I've had some people ask me lately about tracing, so today I'm going to give you my top 5 reasons why I trace and hopefully encourage you to try it too. Plus, I'll show you what I use for tracing paper instead of actual tracing paper. So let's dive in. In mostly no particular order, the first reason on my list is I don't want to ruin my vintage patterns. Vintage patterns are fragile. You're working with pieces of paper that are literally 60 to 80 years old or older. Sometimes they're in terrible condition, and even when they're in good condition, they're still really old pieces of paper that you're going to be probably handling a lot. And plus, imagine if it's a pattern that you love and you sew multiple times. I have several vintage patterns like that. I think I've made this skirt at least 5 times, either as a skirt alone or as the skirt of a dress, and you can see I traced it off from the original. Unfolding and ironing out the wrinkles and fold lines and all that handling and refolding of the original vintage pieces can really add up to a lot of wear and tear for them. Which is also why I store my vintage patterns in archival-friendly bags, and I usually leave the envelope empty at the front, so I'm not reaching in and out of that all the time. Because sadly, these beauties are often the things that are in the absolute worst condition of all. Even if you don't plan to make any alterations to the original pattern pieces, it's a good idea to consider tracing the original pieces to preserve their integrity and to prevent too much handling of those precious original vintage paper pieces. Reason number 2, on modern patterns, it preserves all the sizes. If you're sewing with a modern pattern that has multiple sizes, you might wonder, why would I bother tracing it when I can just cut out my size and jump right in? And I mean, obviously you can, and I have, but here's a reason not to and why I usually don't. Say you've spent $16 on a pattern or more if it's an indie pattern and you cut out your size. And you make a muslin or you sew the garment and it doesn't fit. Big 4 pattern companies with all that built-in ease making it confusing, I'm looking at you. So you cut out the wrong size. And grading isn't literally just making each piece larger and smaller. So you might have cut off some of the shoulder seam of the next size, probably some of the hem, the side seams, probably all of the above. Since you cut your size out of the tissue and you didn't trace it, you can't do anything about it. You might be trying to rummage through your trash or recycling, trying to find the little bits of pieces in the hopes of putting it together again. Not that I know anything about that. Sure, you could figure out how to grade it to the next size that you want to sew next, but why do all that work when the pattern company has already done it for you? If you'd traced the original pieces the first time, you could just retrace them in the right size. So here's a good example of that, where I originally thought that the C cup of the Charm Patterns Rita blouse would work for me, but I later decided that the D cup was actually better. This was easy for me to swap to the D cup piece because I had kept the original tissues intact, and I just retraced the larger cup size. Tracing multi-size patterns is also great because what if you change sizes in the future? Not only do you save yourself money from having to buy the pattern again and cut it out again, you save yourself the headache of trying to grade it up or down yourself, which you might not even feel comfortable doing. You also save yourself potential heartache in case the pattern company has gone out of business or it's an out-of-print pattern and you just can't find it again. You'll always have the original multi-size piece intact, as annoying as these large suckers are. I cannot believe I unfolded this and now I have to fold it again just so that I could make that point. Reason number 3, I preserve the original pattern so that I can make adjustments or keep all the style options intact. I make adjustments to most of my sewing patterns. At the very least, I know I'm always going to lower the bust dart, probably raise the waistline. I may need to make a narrow shoulder adjustment or a gaping neck adjustment or whatever else. You might not be at the point yet in your sewing where you're making adjustments to the pattern, but I highly recommend starting at some point. It's a great way to get the fit that you're looking for your unique body. And what if it's a pattern that has 2 neckline style variations on the same pattern piece with different cutting lines, which sometimes patterns have? So what happens if I do adjustments to the original pattern pieces or I cut out one of the 2 style options for a neckline? First, okay, we definitely don't want to be cutting and taping back together vintage pattern pieces, especially not with tape that's not for archival purposes. That is a naughty sewing no-no. But that's what I would have had to do for this dress bodice if I wanted to make the alterations that I needed, because I had to lower the darts and raise the waistline seam. But even for modern or reproduction patterns, what if I make the wrong alteration? I know I usually shorten waistline seams because I'm short-waisted, but I've encountered some patterns where I thought that alteration was necessary and I was wrong, so I had to go back to the original and start over. That was the case for this dress, where I originally shortened it thinking I would need it shorter, and turned out that the bodice was too short, so I went back to the original to lengthen it. Granted, a waistline seam is pretty easy to adjust without the original, and yes, I could have figured out how to undo it myself, but again, the pattern already did the work for me. I don't want to do it myself. And sometimes patterns give you different style options on the same pattern piece. These two necklines are wildly different from each other. So if these were on the same pattern pieces, and granted for this pattern I'm not actually sure they were, but sometimes necklines are on the same pattern piece. So if they were, and I'd cut out the scoop neck version first, I'd never be able to go back and make the wing collar version. But because I traced both of them from the original, I can make both of them at any time. I keep the originals intact so that I can refer back to them for any reason, particularly on my adjusted patterns or patterns that have multiple style options. Maybe it's 3 years later and I don't need the same adjustments that I did before, or I don't like the ones that I made the last time I made the garment, or I wanted to use a different neckline than I did the last time, so I need to trace it from the original again. I can't do any of that if I've cut the original pieces and altered them. If I ever want to just go back to the drawing board for any reason or refer back to the original patterns, I can easily do that since I keep the original ones intact. Moving on to number 4, I can draft endless tweaked versions. This pattern right here, this is Simplicity 4401. This is why. This is a vintage cigarette pants pattern from the early 60s. I have made this pattern more times than any other sewing pattern that I own, and most of those times involve drafting something a little bit different, and all of those times involve changes from the original pattern. First I made a muslin, and the crotch was hilariously low even for vintage pants, so I raised it and then did capris with a hidden zipper in the pocket just for fun. The leg length was super short because that was exactly as much vintage fabric as I had. Then I turned the pattern into capri jeans, omitting the waist darts and doing full-on 1950s style women's jean styling, complete with a hidden zipper in the front pocket, back yoke, belt loops, back pockets drafted to fit my iPhone, and all the top stitching. And I lengthened the legs since this time I had enough fabric. Then I used the capri jeans version to make actual jeans, lengthening the legs again, wearing those right now. Then I went back and made cigarette pants a few times like the original pattern, lengthening the original capri leg, and I think probably combining them with the legs from the jeans. And at some point I made a pair of twill cropped pants with a longer leg than any of the capri versions previously and a narrower leg, and used the pocket details from the jeans version, but drafted a front curve for the pocket instead. Then I used a really heavy fabric and I made cigarette pants again, but with the waist darts removed due to the bulky fabric. Then I turned the jeans versions into an overalls version, but with a front curved pocket from the narrow twill leg pants, and I drafted my own bib and straps. And at some point along the line, I drafted them into fly front jeans using the pockets and the fly from the ginger jeans pattern, but the back yoke and pockets from my previous jeans version. And honestly, there's probably more. I've lost count at this point. But how could I ever have done any of that with the original pattern pieces? I rest my case. And last but certainly not least, reason number 5. Tracing boosts my sewing confidence and my skills. And yes, this is true. So this one may seem a little weird at first, but hear me out because I think it's an important one. Tracing gives me more confidence in my sewing and contributes to helping me develop better skills over time. When I trace off an original pattern, I then have the freedom to do whatever I want without fear of messing up the original. I can mark up the pattern pieces, giving myself little notes along the way. I can work out drafting ideas in my head and play with alterations and adjustments, and mark everything up however I want until I feel like I have it right. I have the freedom to make as many mistakes and false starts as I want because I'm not messing up the original pieces. And the mistakes are important too because they're opportunities to learn along the way. It sounds odd and like maybe a small thing, but it's 100% true that as soon as I bought tracing paper, I felt like the door just opened up for me in terms of my ability to take more control over my sewing, be more creative, make more adjustments, work through my mistakes, all without worrying about the original pattern pieces, and particularly with vintage patterns, that's important since that's what I sew with the most. I barely did that before. And as a result, I make better fitting garments and I'm much happier and more confident with my sewing. I give myself the permission to spend the time to play with things while I trace them, get them just the way I want them, and make mistakes in a very low stakes kind of way. I'll trace things more than once if I need to, and I don't have to worry about ruining the original if I mess things up. In the end, because I trace things first, I'm happier with the final result and I wear it more. I wear my handmade clothing almost every single day, and the things that I wear the most are the ones that I've tweaked over time by tracing things out from the original patterns and getting them just the way I want them over time. So those are my top 5 reasons to trace sewing patterns. Let me talk briefly about the actual paper itself. There are a lot of things that you can use for tracing paper that are not strictly tracing paper or not specifically for sewing, though there's a lot of great products that are, like drafting paper or Swedish tracing paper. While you can do it either way, I like to put the tracing paper on top of my pattern pieces instead of below them, so I need to be able to see through it. So things like drafting paper and the back of wrapping paper wouldn't work for me. What I personally use is actually smooth medical exam table paper. Yes, this is the stuff you sit on at the doctor's office. I'll link what I buy in the description. I bought a case of 12 rolls of this, I think 13 years ago, and I've only just recently needed to buy more. And I've had some years where I trace things almost weekly. So it lasts a long time, and I don't have to feel too precious about it if I make a mistake and I need to start over. It's a lot of bang for my sewing buck. It probably works out to be about $4 or $5 a year for as long as it lasts me. The only downside is you have to be able to store 12 rolls of this, but table skirts are good at hiding things. There's been plenty of sewing blogs over the years with articles about various things you can explore to use for tracing and drafting. So as they say, your mileage may vary, but that's what I like to use, and it's been working well for me for over a decade. So that's a wrap on my ode to tracing sewing patterns. I hope it'll help encourage you to consider tracing too. Let me know in the comments if you have any reasons that you love to trace sewing patterns. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, happy tracing. Bye.